Hi, Tony Sells here. Man, we've got a treat on the line. You know, it's always good when I can get somebody else out there that's taking arrows on the front line, on the marketing end, really trying to help these businesses shape and create their messaging and their go-to-market. And Steve has done this. Steve Lundin with Big Frontier has done this with big corporate America and the Fortune 500 type, and he's doing it with these go-to-market technology companies on all the span in between, including the consumer side. And it's rare that you get that combination of that kind of marketing prowess in one human being. So thanks so much, Steve, for being on the show. Steve, what is the big shift that you're seeing in the marketplace from CEOs understanding about how to go to market?
Well, 5 or 10 years ago, you'd find a company, a CMO or CEO, coming to a company such as ours, a strategic communications firm, and saying, all right, what do we do to create some news?
Right.
This is a product link we've got, or this is some kind of initiative we're following up. How do we turn this into news?
Mm-hmm.
Now, these guys are realizing that the information that they have gleaned, the experience that they've put together over the years, is in and of itself news. It's something that can become the basis of a thought leadership program. It's something that can be turned into content. They're starting to realize the importance of what they actually do know.
Right.
Things that they have picked up in the course of doing their own business, which I feel is sort of an undiscovered resource. You just have to know how to, where to dig. It's like, looking for the Holy Grail in Indiana Jones. You got to be a digger.
And I just speaking to this digging thing, we think we've invented everything. The marketers today think they've invented everything. I was reading this article today about how John Deere started content marketing over 150 years ago. He was actually working with the farmers in the field. He started doing research and then launched a newsletter and a magazine called The Furrow, which educated the farmers on how to use new technology and all the best practices going on literally in the fields, right? And we have this ability, right, of dealing with all these people and aggregating best practices. And it starts kind of simply that simple, right? You can make it that basic. What do you know and see across all the clients that are common truths that your other clients need to know? Can it be that simple?
Well, first you have to think about not necessarily what the market wants to hear, but what do I personally know and what have I experienced? So you have to go through an exercise of self-discovery. And a lot of guys can't necessarily do that. They really don't know where to begin. So my original training was in journalism. I worked at newspapers. I produced, back in the days when it was actually called journalism, not, content or content mills or, journaltorials or journaltainment or whatever you want to call it, not the Brian Williams type stuff.
Right.
But you have to sort of take a step back, assess what you know, and then start to build it out. And the way this works, and the clients that we've had the most success with, don't try to be all things to all people all the time out of the gate. You start with a couple vertical concepts. You move on those, you start getting some traction, you start maybe booking some speaking engagements, doing some blogs, writing some white papers, doing some short videos, getting some byline pieces, places. Before you know it, that particular channel that you're pursuing will start looking at you as an expert, and they'll start coming to you for commentary and other pieces that they might be working on. And that's how you grow it. It's like anything else, it just takes a lot of work.
Right. It does take a lot of work, and you've got to really create it. And there is no secret sauce. The new mediums that are created, whether it's social, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever's going to come out next, those are just mediums, right? I mean, you have to have the story and you have to go to work developing that. And that's one of the things you help clients do, right? It's to dig down, do that self-analysis and find out what about us, what is the genius that we can share? So when you sit down and talk to these customers, what is your process of pulling that out of them?
Well, you also can't function in a vacuum. So before we take an engagement, we're going to do a little research into the field. We're going to talk to some people. We're going to find out what the trends and the hot points are. We're not going to give a guy a blank sheet of paper and say, hey, do a brain dump, tell us everything you know. So the way it works is we come in with somewhat of an agenda, having looked at what the company and what this particular person is capable of doing and talking about, and what the market, what the hot points are in the market, and we try to connect the dots. So we may say, what do you think about this legislation that's coming down? How is that going to affect your industry? What percentage of your industry is going to be affected? And we basically apply journalistic tactics: who, what, when, where, why. We're digging for a story. Once you get a guy fired up and he starts to roll, you'll find out that you've got a gusher on your hands, and he'll produce more content, or she'll produce more content than they actually thought they had. It's really it's a matter of sparking the imagination, and once you uncover that vein, it starts to leak. Get out the blood bucket.
Right. The catalyst is there, right? I mean, so as when you've gone down and you've started looking at different types of businesses, my favorite thing is the client that sits in front of me and they're like, well, you don't understand, my business is different. I mean, I hate that line because it's never different and there's always something there. What is the hardest business you've ever really tried to figure this out with? And then what was the breakthrough that came out of that?
I would say one of our most challenging businesses out of the gate was probably a sauerkraut company that came to us, and that's in the consumer packaged goods space. They said that they had an aging audience. Makes sense, right?
Right.
They weren't getting any traction with new audience. They weren't relevant to the consumer going to the store to buy food.
Right.
Under the age of 65, wearing a members only jacket and a little cap and driving in a Crown Vic.
I mean, I can't remember the last time I ate sauerkraut.
Reuben sandwich.
Yeah.
So they said, how do we make this more relevant? I said, we're going to have to sort of basically, this was an instance of not a thought leadership program, but a reconceptual program. We're going to have to make this relevant through something that somebody was using. This is about 12, 13 years ago. So we took the core element, the sauerkraut, we stuffed it in an olive, we marinated that in vermouth, we threw it into a glass of vodka, we shook it up with some ice, and we called it a K-tini. It got international press.
Wow.
So it was the reinvention of the product through a new type of usage that was relevant to the audience that they were looking to get some inroads with.
And then when you said that comment about the Reuben, that was like that. You also packaged this up, right? You actually pulled this together to get people to remember and to separate kind of that as part of the brand, right? I mean, you didn't just sell the product, buy the product itself. You had to sell it as an intelligent system that was part of something else. Talk to us about that.
Well, that is a technique of recognizing that your product or your solution might be an ingredient to a bigger story or an ingredient to something that's already been adopted in the marketplace. So if you can take something that someone's already using, in this instance it happens to be, let's just say, sauerkraut's part of a Reuben sandwich. You take that element and you the rising tide floats all boats. You promote that particular type of usage. To make that sandwich, you have to have that element. And that applies to various types of products and services that are in the marketplace now. To utilize this thing, you need to take advantage of our service. And maybe we're the best ingredient to help you make that happen. And we're gonna keep that core recipe, that core thought, or that core solution top of mind, so that when you're out looking for it, you may be looking for our thing. It's like Intel Inside. That's something that has become part of our marketplace. People look for that now, or Body by Fisher,
right.
or Body by Peanut Freeman.
Yep.
These are elements of large things that have developed a life of their own.
Well, and I think one of the things that's so important if you guys were able to do that with sauerkraut, right? It's about getting above and beyond your product or your service and looking at how that's a character in a bigger play. It's about making it about them and not about you, and really driving in to understand is the overall value that we're creating here, and then marketing that and being willing for your product or your name to take a second line in order to create more value for the person that's buying. And that's kind of what you did there. And you were able to do that with consumer goods, right? Literally a consumable product. I think a lot of companies could take a lesson from that are in industries that are part of a solution and do the same thing. Was that fair?
Absolutely correct. It takes a big company to realize that they may not be front and center in an approach like that. But by taking essentially a side seat, a co-pilot seat, if you will, to that type of a story and that type of initiative, they're actually going to wind up generating more sales because they're developing more of an excuse for use within the marketplace that they're looking for. So they're broadening their market. You may completely dislike a certain type of product, but when that product is used inside a recipe or in something that you personally like, it doesn't matter. You're still going to seek that product out. So you create new users and evangelists just by virtue of creating awareness that your product is a key ingredient to something someone already likes. You're piggybacking on an existing like.
You know, there's companies out there like doing it in the consumer space like you just described. And then you got these big technology organizations like Adobe that own CMOorg, right? And here, the two things apparently have nothing to do with each other, but they got everything to do with each other, right? There is a content machine here in CMO.com or CMO.org, which one it is, that is generating all this content that's educating the market on how to get better all the time. And yet it's owned by an organization that sells software where primarily all their software is used by the teams that work for that CMO. Those two things are really understanding the entire ecosystem and how they play together. Is that what you're helping clients figure out because they just can't see the forest for the trees?
Well, again, it comes down to you have to realize that possibly the best thing for your company may not be attempting to put your company front and center in the story. And yes, that is the case. And a lot of people and a lot of companies are reluctant to get behind a strategy like that because they'll have a brand manager or a CMO come in and say, hey, we can't be doing initiatives that don't have our name on the front door. Not realizing that by doing something like this, you're ostensibly opening up new doors. So back to your point, people may be adopting that content, utilizing that content, and then at some point tracking that content back to a source or realizing, hey, a light bulb goes off. Maybe there's more, where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe there's more that I should be looking at. So there's more than one way to get your customer than just hitting them over the head with a hammer that's got your brand name etched on it, hoping it'll leave its mark on your forehead. And companies have to realize that in a very crowded, noisy space, one of the easiest ways to get a message across is go to the pond where people are already drinking and, be the Mio drop in that pond. Be the thing that's already being consumed, but just add a little flavor to it and say, hey, guess, by the way, we're the guys making this pond taste good.
I mean, it's that simple. And I think one of the reasons companies need organizations like you and me or especially with you from the strategy side and us from the execution side, is they only get that perspective if they engage with someone like you who can help get above the baby and explain why it's not as attractive as they might think it is, right? I mean, no one's got an ugly baby yet. There's stuff going around. There's people walking around that wouldn't make a model. And I think that's part of the problem is they need that outside source, that objective source for from organizations like you who've been there, done that, and they can see how that entire system goes together. Thanks so much for being on the show.